Am I glad I got this job instead of mining some dead rock out in the middle of nowhere?
Hello, traveler. Will you join me for a while? You strike me as someone with an interesting story. Call it scholar's intuition. Meeting a kindly stranger is always a blessing. What brings you to Cydonia?
This one's all ours.
You may. I just finished a circuit of the Sol system. I've been studying Galileo lately, and I wanted to pay tribute to the planets that inspired him. Sightseeing on Mars. My intuition about you must have been correct. Most stop in Cydonia for the strong drinks at the Broken Spear. You must be more interesting than most people. It's going to be a philosophical text about my theories on the intersection between science and the divine. I've been studying that relationship for years, and I want to preserve my findings for future scholars. I appreciate the sentiment. Consider my interest piqued. I'd be happy to join you. I have a feeling this will be a fruitful partnership. Are you willing to pay? I dislike taking money from friends, but I'll need some credits to stow my ship at Cydonia spaceport. I'll work to make it up to you, naturally. I know a lot about starship maintenance, and I'm skilled at constructing outposts. I have plenty of piloting experience, too. I also think I'm a decent conversation partner. That has some value on long trips through deep space. Let me think about it. Not sure that's the best way to get me on your side. Sorry, but I can't. I'm not trying to be a hard ass. I just can't go any lower. That's great, but you get what you pay for, you know? I'm sorry, but I can't afford to be that generous. Then we have an accord. Thank you for the offer. I need to speak to someone at the spaceport about stowing my ship. We'll see each other again soon.
Let me know if you need something.
It seems we always run into one another here. I'm happy to see you, Captain. Of course. There are no secrets among friends. That's kind of you, Captain. Nowhere you've heard of. My mothers were listers. They raised me on a small planet in the Narian system. We called it Avalon. LIST is an acronym. It's short for League of Independent Settlers. It's a term for homesteaders who strike out on their own rather than settling in a city. I've met plenty on my travels. They always have remarkable stories to share. Remembering them always makes me smile. Their names were Brenda and Lynette, and they were travelers like me. They met by chance at the Deimos Star Yard and fell in love at first sight. They abandoned their careers shortly after to join LIST and travel together. After they'd established a homestead on Avalon, they traveled to New Atlantis to adopt me. I have, and I'm grateful for it. To live an explorer's life has been an extraordinary privilege. I'll have more than enough interesting stories to tell in my book. I left to begin my studies. It seemed to me like the Starsea was the most reasonable place to find answers about the universe and the divine. Leaving was a difficult decision. but I don't regret it. I found no shortage of material for my book out here in the space lanes. It's going to be a philosophical text, explaining my theories about science and divinity. I'm writing it as a means of preserving my way of thinking for future scholars. To tell you the truth, traveling with you has given me more clarity than I expected. It's obvious that you're an agent of something bigger than yourself. Watching you fulfill that destiny up close has given me a new appreciation for how a single life can be shaped by cosmic forces. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that. Whether I find what I'm looking for or not, I'm grateful to be traveling with you. I haven't enjoyed myself this much in a long time. I'd be happy to. Avalon holds a very special place in my heart. It's a beautiful place that's covered in lakes and almost always shrouded in mist. My mothers thought it resembled the mythological kingdom of Avalon from the Arthurian legends. That's where we got the name. It certainly looked the part. Growing up there felt like living in a storybook. I used to hunt for fairies on the shores near our home. In a sense, they're buried there, side by side on the hill that overlooks our old homestead. They wouldn't have it any other way. I never minded being alone. I enjoy the company of my thoughts and those of the authors whose books I read. Exploring Avalon with a book under my arm as a child set me up perfectly for a life of scholarship. We were, but it wasn't unusual to be attacked by passing spacers. Luckily, we built our homestead sturdy enough to keep them out. My mother's always prepared for the worst. It's the only way to live when you're on your own. They assured that I knew how to defend myself from a young age. No, I'm afraid that's impossible. The legends say you need a fairy to guide you there, and I never did manage to catch one. In all seriousness, I promised my mothers that I'd keep Avalon's location a secret. It was our special place. They didn't want to share it. I call myself an experimental theologian. I have a particular interest in the relationship between quantum physics, probability, and the divine. My beliefs have primarily been shaped by reading the works of ancient astronomers, like Johannes Kepler, Isaac Newton, and Galileo Galilei. A bit of a mouthful, I know. That's why I think it's important to write it all down in a book. Unfortunately not. My mothers chose the last name when they married to honor their shared love of astronomy. I've always considered Johannes Kepler to be something like my guardian angel. I often turn to his writings when I need a new perspective on my own studies. It's an honor to carry his name through the Starfield. I've always thought he'd be awed by how far humanity has come. Mainly through observation. My prized possession as a child was my telescope. I spent hours watching the stars. As I got older, I became fascinated with the mathematics behind what I was seeing, and began to study the works of classical astronomers. My interest in a divine mathematician evolved from their theories about sacred geometry. I believe in something I call the divine mathematician. It's a theory borrowed from those ancient astronomers I mentioned. In essence, I believe that the laws of science govern our daily lives, but that those laws were planned and set in motion by a higher power. I had a feeling you might. I get the impression you've been touched by something otherworldly. I imagine that would shape anyone's perspective. I'd be happy to answer your other questions. I've been dabbling in astrology. Not the answer you'd expect from a student of physics, I assume. I'm treating it as a history lesson and as research for my book. Most of the ancient astronomers I've studied were astrologers, too. They read astrological charts to predict how the planet's movements might affect their lives. It's fascinating to read about, but I've had difficulty practicing it myself. Every astrological text I have references the solar system's stars as seen from Earth. I suppose no one told the ancient Babylonians their astrological methodologies would need to account for a spacefaring society. Yes, that does ring a bell. Decades ago, I met a man called Irvin in New Atlantis who spoke at length about an explorers collective with that name. He said they were searching for truth among the stars. I was fascinated. Irvin offered to introduce me to the other members, but it wasn't meant to be. The colony war broke out shortly after we spoke, and I never heard from him again. Naturally. Another remarkable twist of fate. The odds of you working for the group I nearly joined decades ago are astronomically tiny. I believe it's further evidence that none of this is an accident. Is there anything else you need from me?